It is 6 o'clock. Michael, are you ready?
Yes, we are, Mayor.
Naomi, please start the tape. I will call the regular July 13th, 2021 regular meeting of the Milton Council to order. And we'll begin with the flag salute. Councilmember Morgan, would you lead us then? Please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Naomi, roll call, please.
Mayor Holtzclaw,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vanel,
Here.
Councilmember Bond, Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Briles, Councilmember Morgan.
Here.
Both council members, Bond and Riles, notified me this afternoon that they had family emergencies that precludes them from being here tonight. So if we could have separate motions to excuse.
Motion to excuse Councilmember Riles.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes 5-0. We have another motion, please.
Motion to excuse Councilmember Bond.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That also passes 5-0. We'll move on to audience communication. Would anyone like to address the council? I'll start with those in the room. Please, if you would. If you would, don't mind, I'll take the floor. Yes, please. Name and address, and please try to keep your comments to
My comments to what?
3 minutes.
Yes, sir. The mayor and members of the city council, I am here to discuss the subject of public service and fair pay. Having been a public servant most of my career, I believe that our public servants deserve fair pay for the time and effort they put in serving the public. It may surprise you that this evening I'm talking about you guys. You may have heard from Mr. Saravino, what I'm going to mention. But I do not imply any criticism of our present council when I say I want to attract the best and the brightest members of the community to be councilmen. It's my estimate, and only an estimate, that most of you put in about 16 hours a week in service to the city, or perhaps 40% of a 40-hour week. I may be wrong, but that's just a guess. In addition, there's the time and expense you have to put in just to run for office. That's not an easy task either. For this, you only get $500 a month as members of the council and $700 a month as mayor. I don't believe this is a fair amount. The work you do is of a professional nature, and the responsibilities you have are very large and very important as you are setting policies and practices for an organization with an annual budget of about $21 million. That doesn't include the transfers, which I think go in and go out, and that is about 21. And that provides public services to about 20,000 citizens, and I forget how many homes, but quite a few. In sum, 7 members of the council earn $6,000 a year. Well, that's for 6 of you, and $8,400 for the mayor, a grand total of $44,400. That is only 0.2% of the annual budget. If my math is right, you can confirm that with your number crunchers. And he's one of them, maybe. Assuming average professional salary of $100,000, that may be low, may be high, but that's just my estimate. It seems to me that a fair salary for our city council members should be approximately $40,000 a year. 40,000, not 500 or 6,000, but 40,000. And I don't think that's too generous, honestly. And I don't care what other cities pay. doesn't matter to me. That would mean about 50,000 for the mayor, 40,000 for each council. That would amount to about 1.4% of your annual budget. I believe that's a fair amount to pay for the job you guys hold. Furthermore, I believe each council member should have a modest office the size of a cubicle with a desk, chair, phone, computer, bookcase, file cabinet, and there should be a meeting room for members to hold meetings with citizens or other business owners or important people in the city. There should also be a secretary to serve all of you equally in such an office. So I would see a large office with cubicles, secretary, meeting room, etc. The members of the council should hold regular business hours to meet with citizens. And if, of course, the citizens aren't there to meet with, you don't have to hold the hours, but they should be available. So many hours per week. If I want to come in and talk to you, Stephanie or Adam or whoever, I could call up, make an appointment and through the secretary, and we would have a meeting. I also believe that council members should be required to hold weekly, oh, I did say that, open office hours. I think that's about it. I'll answer any questions you might ask, but I sincerely believe this. I'm not a rich person here in the community. I figured out my salary is about less than half of the average. Not half of the average, I'm about the median. I'm a little below the median. This is a rich community, I didn't know that. So I don't mind paying my taxes. I'm not a person that feels that government is a problem. I believe government is a solution, can be, should be. And I think you should be paid fairly for that service. And that's about it. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Woods. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Mr. Nelson today? I've seen a nod of the head. Is there anyone online? I do not see our Ms. Heidel, please name and address. 2 minutes. Up on you, please. Still muted. We got it. There you go.
Okay, Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place Southeast. Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to welcome Scott Harder, who lives in my neighborhood, and Jody Hawkins to the Communications and Marketing Department. It's great to have them, and I hope to see you a bunch. Secondly, I'm still very concerned about communication. Okay, good communication and transparency in our city. I was quite surprised to see the reaction of our council members last week in regard to the resignation of Kristen Rasmussen. I'd assumed that they would have been notified by email or phone call when she had submitted her resignation almost 2 weeks prior to the meeting. I do hope that management communicates with the staff to let them know who is leaving and who is joining the staff. It's very, very important. Communicating with the employees once the council has been notified is crucial. So they need to know. Personally, as a volunteer, it is very helpful to know who to contact for various departments, so I don't try to contact the wrong person and I can recognize who I should be speaking to. So I really think communicating still is an issue that needs to be seriously improved in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else like to address the council tonight? I'm not seeing too many other members of the public on the screens. Seeing none, we will move on to our old business, city manager, capital projects update.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. We want to take this time this evening to provide council with an update regarding the crosswalk at Jackson High School. We know that the council's asked us to make this a priority, and we have rearranged a few matters in order to address this. We have worked with our consulting engineer, Gray Osborne, to fast track this. One of the delays in us putting together the agenda summary for this evening was work that ensued with myself, Mike Todd, and Gray Osborne Friday night. I think we were here till almost 8:30, working out the particulars for the design so that we could go out to bid under a small works roster to try and work to fast track the project to meet the deadline. On Monday, what we have learned from Gray Osborne is that there's a particular traffic survey that needs to be conducted. It cannot be conducted under COVID, where we don't have realistic traffic patterns for both pedestrian at the high school as well as traffic and speed going up and down the street in terms of traffic count. We are working through that wrinkle right now. I've actually had a conversation with then county council member Terry Ryan this afternoon, informing him of the wrinkle and working with possible contacts both at the school and at the county to try and expedite the traffic survey that needs to be done. I believe that Mr. Ryan understands that we absolutely appreciate the work he engaged in to bring this money forth for this project. And I also know after today's conversation with him that he knows that we're working in good faith. Bottom line is that anytime during COVID, this work would have been attempted to be engaged. What our understanding, we checked with our city attorney, is that this traffic survey needs to be done. Gray Osborne has also indicated that they would not sign off on the design until the survey has been done. So right now we're working to try and expedite that survey either in the month of September or October when the students are back in school. And Director Todd has more detail regarding the study. But we really want you to know that we are working to maintain the positive relationship we have with the council, the county council, and both former council member Terry Ryan, as well as new council member Jared Mead, who Director Todd has been working closely with. We've also reached out to the school, working with officials there to confirm that they themselves don't have any traffic study. It would have realistically not occurred before COVID, and it could not have been performed during COVID. The real final legal hurdle we have is whether or not this survey needs to be done. And right now, the indication is that it has, or it is required, but we're working through some of the details of that. So with that lengthy introduction, I'd like to turn the floor over to Director Mike Todd. Cannot hear you, Mike. We need assistance in unmuting Director Mike Todd, please.
You are a co-host, so you can try again. I hit ask to unmute.
Michael, this might be a good opportunity for me to just jump in here for a sec while Director Todd gets squared away. Is the location for the crosswalk, are we still sticking with this just past the bend and a little bit southwest of the way entrance? Is that still the goal for this project?
Yes, it is. And that's the drawing that Director Todd has for this evening. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Once you share your screen, you can't find the controls anymore. So apologize for that. So is everybody seeing the capital project update, JHS athletics field mid-blast crossing title slide? Yes or no?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So real quickly, and I'll get to Councilmember Cavallari's question in the process here. So what we've done working with the school district and working with Frank Reinhardt and I have gone out there and looked at the site and done many things. We've got an alignment that is preferred alignment that is close to where students and the community members presently cross. You kind of want to go where the migratory patterns are. If you move the crosswalk too far, people won't use it. We've looked very carefully at the spacing and alignment that's required to allow a complete regular ADA ramp slopes. You can't make them too steep. And we also want to need to avoid the catch basins that are out there because we don't want to interfere with our stormwater water flows. We've tried to preserve, we are preserving the drive-through drop-off function on the north parking lot that originally one of the early designs was asking the school district to lock that gate. If you look at how the community uses that for both youth sports and dropping kids off at camps, it's a drive-through function. It was important to maintain that. We've gone and worked with the school district both early on when this was in the concept phase, early concept phase, and we were out there as late as last Friday morning with the director of, or one of the high-level officials in their capital projects group. We got their agreement that this alignment makes sense. And actually, while we were out there, we also got a chance to talk to the coach who's been there for many, many years, more than 2 decades as a PE teacher and as a coach for both cross country and track and other sports. And he wholeheartedly endorsed this location as being something that he thinks he could get the students to use, which is an important part of any crosswalk you put in there. So normally the next step would be formal drawings and specs that we put out for bid. And we are technically entering, remember we're talking about our phasing approach to things, we technically would be entering the designing and scoping phase and spending money on a contracted design. So concept phase, this is where we're using city resources, internal staff, very limited amount of money. And then we're going to come to you if necessary and go into a design contract. We have engaged RH2 is the company that was working with us before, and they are in the process of working on this project and a couple of others for us. That is not yet ready to go out to anywhere, but they're working on the design. But as Councilmember Cavallari talked about, that if you see my cursor there, this is the proximate location.
Director Todd, we're not seeing the map on the screen.
Thank you. And you didn't see my other slides either. I apologize.
Problem.
There's the slide. Okay, apologize. So there is the crosswalk location. It's close enough to where people typically are coming from the north parking lot or the south parking lot or from the baseball fields or the football field or softball fields to make the crossing at that point. We would have an RRFB here if the council wants to spend the money out at both locations, and a preparatory sign down here that says crosswalk ahead, and one up here that says crosswalk ahead. In discussing with the school district, we can see that as soon as you put the crosswalk here, the herds will cross that grass, will wear a path. And so the school district would be amenable to putting in an asphalt extension of their existing asphalt path that would connect to the crosswalk. And that could be done either as part of this project or later on, but that is important to make that as part of the design. Next slide shows you what if you were standing on the south side of the road looking north. It's a typical U-shaped ADA cross ramp, curb ramp. So the crosswalk would be here, and that's what the ramp would look like on that side. And on the other side, looking south, that's what you'd see, and this would be where that path would take you directly on the asphalt path. So that was where we were headed. In the effort to expedite this, city manager contacted on-call engineering, Grant Osborne, and said, geez, what do you think? Is there any way to make this thing go faster? Get as creative as possible. What could you do? And one of their first questions was, what will show us your traffic study? And we said, geez, we don't think we've got a traffic study. And they informed us that a study is required per the manual on uniform traffic control devices. That is an FHWA federal standard. The state of Washington adopts that, and our code does not change that. We discovered in the process of talking to them that the reason this is probably in there is that once you mark a crosswalk, it becomes a crosswalk. And if someone is injured in that crosswalk, one of the questions that get asked in court could be, show us your traffic study that justifies why you put a mid-block crossing when you have not explored other alternatives. So it may be perfunctory that we need to do that. And it is the belief of many people before me and city engineer and I now that we probably don't need to do that full study from a blank sheet of paper, because we know quite a bit about this, but we do have to go through the steps of doing a traffic count, pedestrian count, look at the width of the road, look at the sight line, look at the speed of traffic, and make sure it is up to snuff to justify a mid-block crossing. So there is a liability if we put a crosswalk in without doing that study. That's the bottom line. And as the city manager said earlier, basically Grant Osborne said, if you asked us to do this, we'd say thanks, but no thanks. We will not endanger our own professional liability to go ahead and do that. We looked deeper. There is no study that's been done by the city. We asked the school district. They had not done a study. They recognized that this was a difficult project. And that's one reason they said they've never really asked for this, but when the PTSA came to them a couple of years ago and said, geez, wouldn't it be nice? They said, sure, we'll support that project. But the bottom line is that study right now is the gating item. That results will dictate the final design and potentially other traffic calming measures required. If we find out that people are going 35 miles an hour 85% of the time, other things will have to happen before this crosswalk would be advisable because of the sightline distances. Normal approach to the project would be do this traffic study, then do the design. Normal project, that would add some time to this. And so we could do a risky approach, and we're talking about that and looking at the consequences. Maybe we design this assuming we know what's best and then see if the traffic study will justify that. We kind of hope and adapt it, but we cannot go to bid for a construction contract until we're sure that we are going to be designing and building something that would comply with whatever that traffic study would say. I put down their last bullet just to kind of keep us all in the same sheet of music, whether it's a small works project or a traditional design bid build project. It takes on the order of 90 days. Sometimes you can get lucky on some pieces, but if you want assurances it's going to get done on time, and particularly dealing with the difficult environment right now with a lot of construction sucked up by other agencies and other big projects, it's 90 days from the time you've got the design ready to go out to bid and when you can expect it to be hopefully done for a short project like this. That's going to be tough. So I just want to have people keep that in mind, that under public works contracting procedures required for municipal governments, it's not as fast as you or I could do it when we talk to our buddy to do this in our own home. It's about twice as long. So we're dealing with that. With that, I'm going to unshare my screen and take questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions? Councilmember Cavalieri? Didn't see your light. And then followed by Councilmember Stecker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Director Todd. When we initially started talking about this, I think one of the reservations, not only myself, I think several of us up here had, was this specific location that seems to be striped or targeted for a crosswalk. Just looking at the topography, it's maybe 8 to 12 feet from the mouth of a viable and usable, quite trafficked driveway. Not to mention the incredible bend, which has to be probably, I would say, about a 7-degree angle coming around the corner. If there was ever, in my opinion, I think this is why I've always been apprehensive, and I don't not support the idea of a crosswalk near the high school. I don't support this one. As I've stated before, I think this is a very dangerous location. Even if you just took the tree line that they have around the mouth of that driveway, someone pulling out of there, 12 feet from the mouth of that driveway to the crosswalk's beginning is not enough time to stop. It's a very unsafe location. So when we started having this discussion, and I believe I asked Councilmember Stecker the same thing, I thought we agreed that the east on the other side of if we were going to do this, the other side of the other driveway, the eastern mouth of the driveway, and the school even stated that they would shut that down or shut it, when kids are going to be crossing, that would be shut down or not usable. So it appears that when we had this discussion, a lot of things have changed. So I don't support this location for a lot of safety reasons. And I think when the traffic safety study takes the baton and rolls with this, I hope they take into account that this is still a school with children. And so it's not just like a mall or something like that. We know it's a high level of kids driving through there and maybe stepping on the gas. But I think this location is incredibly unsafe. And on that basis, I will not support this. Thank you.
Councilmember Stecker?
Yes, I have two issues, and I want to make sure I make this statement first because I was very grossly misquoted last time I spoke on this crosswalk. I am in favor of a crosswalk at Jackson High School. Very much in favor of this crosswalk at Jackson High School. I am not against it. I agree, number one, with Councilman Cavalieri that you were on the right-hand bend of a blind curve. The red crosswalk there is just really rolling the dice. It does not make sense to me. There will be cars coming around that curve, and even with the solar powered lights, I think that's very dangerous. I think we should look at moving a little bit further down so that people coming around that curve will at least be able to see that crosswalk within some type of stopping distance, just to ensure the safety of the students and adults using it. That's number one. And number two, the other issue that I want to make sure there's still not confusion on this, because I heard a comment about it, and that is the funding issue of this crosswalk, because we've once again heard that same statement. The funding for this crosswalk very clearly we cannot allow that to come from the county grant. That county grant that was originally given to us, that in essence we turned back, which then Councilmember Mead said you can have, please feel free to use. This crosswalk can be covered by a Smart Streets federal grant, and all of it can be paid for, no problem, the city doesn't pay for it. The money from the county can be used in conjunction with the 90,000 we got from the state for the renovation of the park. It's on our CIP project list. Silvercrest, thank you. The Silvercrest Park renovation. That's a $300,000 park renovation. 90,000 from the state and the 100,000 from the county will reduce our cost to the city to 110. If we use the county money for this crosswalk, we cannot use Smart Street money for the park. It will cost us $100,000 to the city. So we can get both done, but by using the county money for the crosswalk, it will cost the city of Mill Creek $100,000. So they have to pay an additional $100,000 for the park. I just want to make sure that's clear, because we had this big discussion before, and that's caused a lot of consternation. I am not against this crosswalk. I just want to make sure we use our grants properly to the best interest of the city to defer costs to the city. We can do both, and if we do both wisely, then we save ourselves over $200,000 to the city of Mill Creek. So I just heard that statement again, that this money's we'll use the county money to pay for this. If we do, that would not be in the best interest of the city of Mill Creek.
Yeah, purpose of tonight's briefing was just more on the location. I don't believe that source of the funding is an issue any longer, but let's not go down that road
But
tonight.
I heard it mentioned, so I want to make sure it's clarified.
I did not hear that mentioned. Councilmember Morgan,
I heard it from the city manager, he mentioned it would be paid for the grant from the county.
Thank you, Director Todd. I actually have questions. You brought up that if a traffic study showed that driving down the street has speeds in excess of 35 miles an hour, which might be fairly common given teenagers and the way they like to drive, that we might have to revisit the design element. What type of revision might be necessary if that is shown to be true?
Well, typically, if your people are traveling at 35 instead of 25, you need to design sight lines reflective of that. So it would probably be eliminating some parking, but as Councilmember Cavalieri and others pointed out, there's a curve the other direction that gets to be problematic. It is not a blind curve, it's a very open curve, but you would consider that. You might have to do other things to be preparatory to say that crosswalk ahead. Could be a flashing beacon that says crosswalk ahead that was tied in with those RFBs at the crosswalk location. You might put in things like speed tables or other traffic calming measures to get the traffic to slow down to 25, because we really want them to go be 25 at the school anyway. So there's lots of things you could do. We're just saying until we really know what's going on, it is not prudent to rush to a design without having done that traffic study. And I think we're all under the assumption that that had been done by somebody in the past, RH2, Grant Osborne, everybody has kind of assumed somebody else had done that. Doesn't mean we have to do it necessarily, but it would be very advisable from a liability standpoint. Will make our attorney very nervous and probably should make us all nervous if we accept the liability without going through all the right steps. So that's the dilemma. And this has really just occurred in the last 3 days. We're going, can we go fast? And we went, there's a problem here we didn't even know about. There's a bump in the road we didn't know about.
Now, theoretically, if we did have to change the design with the things you mentioned, would that bring the price point above what has been allocated for this?
Yeah, it gets into the funding, and the mayor's advised us not to go too far. But overall, we have in the big picture, particularly from some council members that are new, we have something called Complete Streets money from the Transportation Improvement Board. And that goes to all kinds of safety improvements And so we're working on spending that money by March of 2022. We also have money from the county, about $100,000 to spend on similar kinds of projects or park projects. We will not lose any money. With the right color money will go to the right kinds of projects. The city will capture all that money so long as we can get the projects in place by March of 2022 for the TIB money and by the end of 2022 for the county money. So there's no danger of losing this money so long as we can get some projects designed and in place.
Thank you, Director Todd.
Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess for me, I'm beyond frustrated that, and I don't even think frustrated can really capture the breadth of how frustrated I am. That here we are in July and we are just now finding out that we need to do a traffic study when we've been talking about this since January. And we've been going round and round and round about this since January. And so then we have to rehash all our conversations, all the discussions and all the arguments about this crosswalk every single time. And I am just beyond frustrated. And also, if we are looking at this timeline, then are we even gonna be able to do this year? Because we're gonna start to run into now where it's gonna be past our construction time and it's gonna be too late to do it this year. So I feel like we started in January and we said this was our priority and we wanted to make this happen this year before the school started. And here we are in July, looking at this and find out that now we need to go back to the table and get a traffic study. And I guess I don't have, I'm not sure I have further things to say than that I'm just really frustrated that we keep coming back here and that we're just now finding out that we need this traffic study. I feel like we should have been ahead of this. We should have found out months ago that we needed this traffic study instead of finding out here on July 13th. Because from what you're telling me, this isn't going to be happening this year. And we had said it would be happening this year. So that's all I have to say right now.
Any other questions or comments? I think my only comment is I share people's frustration, or not frustrations, concerns about safety. I just want to caution us about making pronouncements about something that's unsafe. Last time I checked, I'm not a traffic engineer, nor anyone else up here. And I know Director Todd would be able to go into detail of the myriad of standards that traffic engineers have to evaluate when looking at locating a crosswalk. It's just not, let's put it there. There's lots of things to consider. Site distance is one of them. Topography is another. The curvature of the roads. There are a myriad of factors, not to mention the existing conditions with locations of driveways and catch basins that all have to be taken into account. So I'm confident that the traffic engineers under Director Todd's guidance will work to look at all these safety issues to make sure that whatever is put in place there will be a safe location for a crosswalk. And as Director Todd said, with this traffic study shows that some calming measures are warranted. There's many things that can be done to make sure that that location of that crosswalk is as safe as possible. So, any further questions before we wrap up this update for tonight? Okay, thank you, Director Todd. Thank you, Michael. I think next on our old business is the continuing update on the ARPA funds. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just turning the floor over to our Finance Director, Laurel Kinson. Laurel, get us started, please.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to take a minute to clarify the differences between the CARES funding and the ARPA funding. I would say the biggest thing is that with CARES, local governments had a short amount of time to expense CARES funds, and then only unbudgeted expenses could be claimed. So CARES funding was for fast-tracked economic assistance, and they had a 5-point eligibility test. So all of your expenses had to qualify under every single measure. So they had to be necessary, they had to be COVID related, they had to be unbudgeted, they couldn't cover budget revenue shortfalls, and they couldn't be for any kind of prior planned expense. So with ARPA, it provides a unique opportunity for local governments to make strategic investments in long-lived assets, to build reserves, to enhance financial stability, and to cover temporary operating shortfalls until economic conditions and operations resume to normal. So I just wanted to go over, I know we've kind of ground this to a pulp, but I wanted to cover in these four main categories for eligible expenditures. I didn't go over what exactly we could do with revenue loss very clearly at our last meeting. So I just wanted to touch base on that. So with the revenue loss category, it's much less restrictive than the other categories. So in your other categories, you had to meet, you had to jump through a lot more hoops. So with revenue loss, this is going to give us a much wider area. And so as long as we provide services or aid to citizens, this criteria is going to be the easiest for us to claim. So I would say to think more broadly. So I know with some people had mentioned broadband, but when we go into broadband, it has to assist underserved or unserved locations without reliable wireline of 25 Mbps uploads and 3 downloads. So that's just there. It gets stickier in the other categories. So I just wanted to cover revenue loss. And the main thing in revenue loss is that we just can't spend the money on principal or interest on prior debt service, and then we can't just stick the money into reserves. And so with that, I wanted to cover how we come up with this category. So we start with our 2019 revenues. And so this is going to be your baseline that you use your growth rate from. So our growth rate is coming from 2016 through 2019 revenues that are put together, and then you just figure out what your growth rate is based on those last 4 years. So we did end up with a 9.1% growth rate. And so with that, the next, so right now we can only claim 2020. And I'm going to go over how we got the number we have come to. And I would say the biggest thing to remember to understand this is that you have base revenue, and with that growth rate, you're just basically taking your base revenue and then you're multiplying it by your growth rate. So each year you would expect your revenue to grow by 9.1%, which is where this top line is. So anytime our revenue does not come in and meet that, it's called a counterfactual revenue. If anytime our revenue is below that, any money between where we came in and where this counterfactual number is, we can claim that as a loss. And so that's where all of the loss in this image would be this gray area. And then they're saying that the black is where your revenue would be in theory. And so in theory, they're saying your revenue would have been higher if you had not experienced revenue losses related to COVID. So that is why I would recommend this specific item. So in here, so in 2019, we came in after we removed our federal grants, we came in at about 22.1 million. So from there, as we build onto that for each year, that's what this purple line is. And so 2020 actuals came in at about 18.7 million. And so between our actual revenue and our counterfactual revenue, we have a revenue loss of $5.4 million. So that means we have a pretty wide range of things we could do with that funding. So we don't have to jump through hoops for the other categories if that's something we want to do. And then here, I just wanted to cover, so we've got our fiscal year end is in December. Our base year revenue is from 2019. And then right now, the loss we're discussing is for 2020. And so our base year revenue is at 22.1. And then we have a growth rate of 9.1%, which gives us counterfactual revenue of 24.2 million. So from there, our actual revenue for 2020 came in at $18.7 million. So we're looking at the difference between these two numbers, the 18.7 and the 24.2, and then that's where our revenue reduction is coming in. So this number is what is going to help us the most out of all categories, just because we have a much, it'll be a lot easier to meet the criteria that's listed here. So since the main direction is that it has to provide services or aids to citizens, it allows us to invest in infrastructure, cybersecurity, and I was going to note something and I don't think I have it written down. So from here, I will take any questions if anyone has any, and I can bring this back up. I would say the inclusion of the necessary investments in water, sewer, broadband, having those as allowable expenditures shows that the funds from ARPA may be used for capital improvements, so providing tangible benefits to communities and residents after the pandemic has passed. And I think because that was a restriction in CARES, that is something that a lot of cities are pushing, because it could provide some really nice amenities for the community after COVID has either gone away or is not as much of a risk.
Laura, could you put up your second slide? And part of the reason we asked for this to just have a brief discussion is just to make sure everyone's clear, because it wasn't clear to me. We've been allocated $5.8 million. And if you look at these four categories and the calculations that Laura has provided, we already meet the criteria for 5.4 million of that. So our restrictions on that 5.4 million are much less than what it is on the balance. So for that remaining 400,000, we'd have to fit it into A, B, or D. But we have pretty broad latitude with the 5.4 million. It gives us a pretty big range of options and a pretty good time frame in which to use that money. So I think there's a lot of opportunities and some interesting discussions ahead for us.
We have a wide array of options with the whole 5.8 million, not just 400,000 of it.
Well, the 400,000 we have to fit into one of the A, B, or C buckets. So there's a lot of options, but there are more restrictions. The 5.4 million, because that's making up for lost revenue that we can document under the federal government's calculations, we've met the requirements. There's a few things that we cannot use the money for, but there's a lot less restrictions on how we can use that money because we're making up for lost revenue. So that's the point, just to make clear, we don't have to fit all 5.8 million into those categories because 5.4 million of it already qualifies under C.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that if we just claim a loss of revenue, then the city's just keeping the money. But really, even if we claim a loss of revenue, we still have to spend those funds, and we have to have them allocated by December 31st of 2024. But if we did decide to do something that for infrastructure, we would have up until December of 2026 to actually spend the money, as long as it's allocated by 2024.
Councilmember Stecker, I just saw your light on, I'm sorry.
No problem. So, Laurel, this is, I think I understand what you're saying. This is in the best interest of the city to use the clarification or qualification C, use it for the reimbursement of loss of revenue so that we can then reallocate it to whatever services we want and not be as restricted. I understand that. I'm curious on is there any criteria on, does the loss of revenue need to be attributable to COVID-19 criteria, or is it just, whatever your 9.4% rate of growth has been for the last 3 years being applied forward? Is that the criteria as it meets the government standard?
Yeah, so they are assuming that any kind of revenue loss is directly related to COVID. So that's where this gray area, the counterfactual revenue, is based on this. They're basing everything on 2019, basically. And they're saying, this is where your revenues were before the pandemic. So we're going to say that that's where your revenue would have been. And we're going to assume that it was COVID that took your revenue loss or caused the revenue loss. And so anything between this growth rate between the last 4 years, that difference is going to be allocated as a revenue loss. It does.
Understood.
Yeah.
Is your 9, I'm sorry, was it 9.4%? I forget.
It's 9.1.
9.1%. Will they have, does that fit government criteria? Will they, does you're doing a run rate for 2000, you said 14 or something, that meets their criteria, so they will accept that. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. And then the restrictions of how we use it, you listed here in these categories of cybersecurity, healthcare, school education, police, public safety. We can also invest in infrastructure. Is there any restrictions on that? Can we do it for any kind of infrastructure? Does it be COVID-related infrastructure?
As long as the infrastructure provides services or a benefit and aid to citizens, then yes.
So whatever we want to build or create for the citizens, this money could be used for that.
Correct.
Joe. Excuse me.
Thank you.
John, my answer to that is yes. That's why we wanted to have this presentation to make sure it's clear to everyone.
Right. I just want, and my just clarify questions. For example, we can use this for anything we want. So yeah, I don't see an issue with that.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Laurel.
Thanks, Laurel.
Move on to new business, and new business is old business. We're talking pipes again.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. We're pleased to reintroduce our new city engineer, Mr. Frank Reinhardt, to make his first presentation before the city of Mill Creek and the city council. So without further ado, Mr. Reinhardt.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, council members, for hearing me. I'll try and add a different voice to a topic that you've heard about before here. Let me kind of share my screen here. All right. And why aren't you cooperating with me? There we go. Oh, that's annoying. Let me try this again. My apologies. Let's see.
No pressure.
There we go. It's not going to cooperate with me. All right, I'm going to press ahead. This is to talk about the 2021 Grade C Stormwater Pipe Repair Project. This is a project that is part of our current surface water aging infrastructure program. And what I'm bringing to you tonight is a recommendation to award a construction contract. So just to summarize what I'm going to talk about this evening, I'm just going to go over the overall program as we're implementing it today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the scope of the 2021 project particularly. I'm going to talk about the construction contract bid opening that we conducted July 1st and what its results were. I'm going to review for you the project funding for this year and the expense commitments that we've made to date. And then finally provide you a proposed motion and then answer any questions that you have. So the overall surface water aging infrastructure program for the city of Mill Creek right now is focused on making our existing stormwater piping throughout the city last for its full operational life. And the focus is primarily on pipes that are 18 inches in diameter and greater. A few years ago, the city compiled all of our pipe camera data, and we did a comprehensive pipe assessment of the entire city. That was completed in 2018, at which point in time our stormwater pipes were graded. They were given one of 3 grades. Grade F was a pipe section that was identified as an imminent failure. Grade C was a pipe section that was aging faster than the normal operational life of a pipe. Grade A was a pipe that was behaving as we expected for the full operational life of the pipe. And the reason, of course, is that our pipes do wear at different rates throughout the city. There are things that can come along, as some of the pictures you see here, that can degrade pipe function. So the picture on the left shows a point where a pipe has actually failed and collapsed. The pipe on the right, it's a little difficult to see if you're not know what you were looking for, but if you look at the bottom right portion of the pipe, you can see a discoloration of corrosion that's starting to develop on the pipe. So there's an example of a C-grade pipe. The grade F repairs were completed in 2019. As they were actually failed pipe sections, those mainly involved actually digging up and replacing existing pipe. The program then began last year, envisioning annual programs for the grade C repairs of existing pipes. Now, when you're looking at existing pipes that you don't need to pull out of the ground, the ideal procedure that we try and implement is, especially here in the 21st century, is trenchless technology. So we want to, as much as possible, repair a pipe without actually having to dig it up again. And there's a couple different types of technology that have developed in order to address that and to rehabilitate the pipe to address any deterioration that we see in the camera. The 2020 phase of grade C repairs, so this was the project last year, addressed a little over 2,400 feet of lineal pipe with cured in place pipe and 36 sectional cured in place lining locations. So the difference between these two is that the cured in place pipe is a long hose that extends along the entire pipe length from catch basin to catch basin. And we use that when we're repairing a pipe that's showing deterioration in several different places along the pipe length. The sectionals are a little more like what you'd consider a patch. So they are drawn through the pipe to a very specific location and then cured in place just at that location. So this is a couple pictures of what this looks like. The top picture is what you're seeing right now is a CIPP, cured in place pipe lining. It's being drawn down into one catch basin. A pulley system operating at the next catch basin pulls it through the pipe. It's a hollow tube of liner. It's essentially a fiberglass liner with epoxy throughout it, and then they'll inflate it, and that will push it up against the sides of the pipe. At that point in time, it used to be, once upon a time, we blew steam through the pipe to cure it in place. We don't need to do that anymore. We can draw a UV transmitter through the pipe and use UV radiation to cure it in place. The bottom picture kind of shows what this looks like in a pipe cutaway section. So the pipe beforehand is to the left. The pipe after CIPP has been cured in place is on the right. The thing that's important to keep in mind with CIPP is it's not actually replacing the material of the pipe. The pipe is still, in this case, aluminum corrugated pipe. It will remain an aluminum corrugated pipe, but we've coated the inside of it to keep that aluminum from deteriorating more, at least for the life of the pipe itself. So there's an ideal program schedule that has been put together for these grade C repair annual projects. And typically that's a schedule that meets the public works design construction contracting requirements, including the time frame, similar to what Director Todd mentioned earlier in this council meeting. Bids projects during the ideal time of year to bid and award projects, usually when contractors are most interested in filling out their construction schedules, and then most importantly, completes the repairs within the dry weather schedule. So normally, in a normal year schedule, we would start the design in October the year before construction. The design would be completed by approximately March. We would bid the project and award it in March and April, and do the construction in July to September. Due to COVID and the fact that I'm relatively new, we actually are a little delayed this year. So we designed it, we decided to push forward. Built into the design and built into the contract documents is a recognition that we're going to start to move into the rainy season a little bit towards the tail end of the project. And so the bypass requirements that the contractor will be required to deliver on are a little bit more robust than what we would normally address. The 22 annual project, we will return to the ideal schedule. So as I am finishing up the construction of the 2021 project, at the same time, I will be setting up for the concept, the locations, and the design of the 2022 project. The 2021 project in totality is going to install almost 2,500 lineal feet of cured in place pipe and 15 sectional cured in place lining locations. We have a little bit more lineal feet because we have a couple pipe sections that we can get a little more run on. And we've kind of traded it off against fewer pipes than last year, needing the patchwork approach. We were a little concerned about what the costs were going to do this year. It's been a very volatile bidding environment in the construction industry the first half of 2021. So, and we didn't want to run out of what was allocated for this year's project this year, or what was appropriated for this year's project. So we broke the work into a base bid work scope that would form the basis of award for the contract. And then we crafted an additive work scope, which the contractors, or the prospective bidders, I should say, could bid on. And then we would award the additive with the base bid if there was sufficient 2021 budget allocated available. We did anticipate high bids when we opened the advertisement for bids on June 17th, or we started the advertisement on June 17th, 2021. This area here, it's kind of hopscotch through here, shows some of the different areas in which we're doing the different types of repairs. And those were provided in the council packet as well. The longest run of repairs is actually the one I'm prioritizing first, because of the recognition of the school starting and such, and that is to finish the Trillion Boulevard repairs in advance of school starting. Even though the truck does not necessarily cause a lot of disruption to the traffic, it is still a one-lane closure. It is still a potential impact on what would otherwise be high volume traffic, and especially bus traffic. So it's a priority to get finished the bus route repairs first, and then we'll chase some of these others over the course. We do not have a schedule yet of where we are going to be in each one of these areas. That's part of what we will work with a prospective contractor based on tonight's decision to award. So we did open bids on July 1st, 2021, received 4 bids, and our fears were not necessarily recognized. We did actually get a very competitive set of bids. Particularly against the engineer's estimate, which was estimated somewhat high because we anticipated we might have some difficulties. The Allied Trenchless of Wenatchee, Washington, who was the same contractor we had last year, is currently the found, based on review of requirements, review of their submittals, to be the responsible bidder that has provided the lowest responsive bid of the 4 bidders. And I will also note here that, as you can see, as I described earlier, here is the base bid. This was the basis of award. This is the additive price that each contractor bid on top of the base bid. And as you can see in this particular case, Allied was bidding with an eye towards winning the project because they gave us an extremely competitive base bid, whereas some of the others were kind of hedging their bets a little bit more. So just to look at the project funding and kind of look at how we're stacking up against our budget allocation for this year. The CIP allocated $750,000 for the 2021 project. Looking at our project expenses and our encumbrances, so the commitments that we've made that we just haven't paid out yet, we are coming to a project expense and encumbrance total of $536,000. So we are under the allocated budget, even with both base bid and additive thrown in. And our anticipation is that as we get closer to the end of construction, we will be coming back to council with a recommendation for how the remaining surface water utility funds allocated to this year's project might be utilized by the city. And there's a couple different scenarios. One of them, of course, is to consider the possibility of expanding the scope of next year's project. So, but we will follow up on that. That's not a decision for tonight. So this is the summary of the motion that we are recommending to council this evening. We're recommending to council to adopt a resolution as follows. 2 basic points here. The first is the city council authorizes the acceptance of the bid by Allied Trenchless as the successful responsive lowest bid. And point the second, the city manager is authorized to execute the public works contract with Allied Trenchless in the amount of $413,875 following the city attorney's review and approval of the final contract documents. And so with that, do you have any questions?
Councilmember Steck.
Great presentation, thank you. I just have one quick question. Allied Trenchless was our contractor before, so we know they do a good job. Their additive bid is 30 to 50% editors, which I'm sure you did this, but I just have to ask the question. Did we look into why was their additive bid so significantly less? Is it truly an apples to apples bid against the additive costs, or how could it be so much less?
So the way that contractors approach the bidding environment is that a lot of times they look at how much risk there is in association with an additive. So if they think that they can carry the full costs for things like mobilization, traffic control, all those various kind of general costs, then if they can carry that within their base bid, then their additive only really needs to focus in, window in on just the added cost associated with the additional work. And the additive in this particular case is in one general neighborhood location. So it's a pretty simple traffic control setup. And with Allied Trenchless's past familiarity working in the city of Mill Creek, they're familiar with how our streets are laid out and such. I think their bid reflects a confidence that they can handle the full load of mobilization, traffic control within their base bid. And so we're getting a lower bid on the additive purely as a measure of the work that's actually being performed.
So you're comfortable that they won't be coming back to us saying, oh, we came in so low, we need to add an additional $100,000.
The contract would make that prohibitive for them to attempt that particular approach.
Okay,
Fixed price contract, so they're taking the risk. If their bid is low, that risk is on them.
Yep.
Any further questions, Councilor Steck?
yeah, I've just seen so many times I've sat up here with contractors that come back and said, I'm sorry, I know it was, I bid this out, but I can't do it for that, so I've got to add this additional amount. And some of those I saw I thought were fixed prices as well when we had that discussion. But we're comfortable, that's great, that's my question.
Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Frank. A fantastic first presentation. Welcome aboard to
Thank you.
begin. Thank you. I love these trenchless construction projects. They tend to be both cost efficient and have the least overall impact to the cities. And I like your approach of taking care of Trillium Boulevard with the school impact and trying to get that taken care of prior to school transit starting. I think that's a good approach. I had a quick question in terms of the actual CIPP process. Does it extend the life of the pipes beyond their actual original lifespan? Or is it just bring it to its original lifespan?
It's probably fair to say that, oh, I'm sorry. It's probably fair to say that it is not intended to extend the lifetime of a pipe. Normally there's a lot of debate on what a lifespan of a stormwater pipe actually is. Usually everybody dances around either the long-standing industry standard of 50 years or the highly optimistic standard of 80 years. But either way, typically speaking, the goal is to only provide a certain amount of additional liner to get to the operational life of the actual structure of the pipe. So anything beyond that would be just kind of luck of the draw, really.
Great, thanks.
Any further questions? Hearing none, Councilmember Cavalieri,
All right, I'd like to make a motion if there's no further questions.
go ahead.
To authorize the city manager to execute the contract with Allied Trenchless in the amount of $413,875, following the city attorney's review and approval of the final contract documents.
Seconded.
Did you capture both bullet points?
I didn't think the first one was necessary.
Mr. Mayor, the first one is the very important one. We have to award bids first.
Needs to be part of the motion, acceptance.
Also, the city council authorizes the acceptance of the bid by Allied Trenchless as a successful response to the lowest bid.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The resolution is approved 5-0. Thank you again, city engineer. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this project to you.
Moving on to our consent agenda, 3 items tonight. First is item F, approval of checks number 63506 through 63550 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $186,334.82. Audit committee was the Mayor Pro Tem substituting for Councilmember Briles and Councilmember Steckler. Were there any exceptions?
No exceptions.
In unison. Item G, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $232,919.61. Were there any exceptions?
No exceptions. No exceptions.
In the city council meeting minutes of July 6, 2021, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve this consent agenda.
Seconded.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda is approved. Moving on to reports, the only thing I had tonight is I was wrong on my schedule of the meeting with the county executive next week, not this past week, so I don't have anything to report until our next meeting. Mayor Pro Tem, do you have a report tonight?
No report.
Councilmember Steckler.
No, I just requested the city manager, could you give us an update on, I have a number of questions on this addressed to me. Opening of City Hall, you're in a stage of reopening right now. When is your schedule to totally reopen and provide full services? You can give us an update on that when you do yours. And also we do need to update the website, which still shows us being closed. That's it.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Just real quick, Mayor. Just wanted to give a shout out and thank you to the Public Works and the staff involved with being responsive to the businesses that addressed some safety concerns down in town center, how quickly they got on that. And the business owners were very pleased that the city is that responsive to their needs. Thank you to all. Good job.
Councilmember Morgan, any report tonight?
No reports, Mayor.
City Manager, your reports, please.
Yes, Mayor. One more, please. So, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, a couple announcements for this evening. Recently, our long-serving Civil Service Commissioner Chair, Mr. Jack Ekman, announced that he needed to resign as a result of moving out of the city of Mill Creek. I want to inform the council that I have appointed Mr. Michael Kidd, a 14-year resident of the city of Mill Creek, to serve in that capacity on the Civil Service Commission. Mr. Kidd is a 14-year resident of the city, a retired naval officer, and most recently worked in supporting our community and state by working on the 2020 census. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of Texas and a Master's in Education and a Master's Certificate in Project Management from George Washington University. He's worked also as a volunteer for Washington State Employer Support for the Guard and Reserves, ESGR, which is a Department of Defense program that supports National and State Guard, Reserve service members, and veterans. And we believe with Mr. Kidd's exceptional career that he will serve to enhance an already very strong Civil Service Commission. I also want to announce the appointment of Jody Hawkins as our newest communications and marketing coordinator. At our last council meeting, I announced publicly the resignation of Kristen Rasmussen, which I spoke with each of you individually about before that announcement at City Council. Jody Hawkins will be joining Scott Harder, which was also recently hired in a similar role. Ms. Hawkins will also be responsible, like Mr. Harder, for coordinating and planning community outreach, nurturing working relationships with other organizations, nonprofits, and coordinating activities to help develop and maintain effective communications with both our internal community of stakeholders here at City Hall, as well as our external community. Ms. Hawkins is a longtime Everett resident and proud graduate of Everett Community College and Washington State University, where she holds a bachelor's degree in integrated strategic communications. As a communications and marketing specialist, Ms. Hawkins enjoyed 5 years at Boeing's Future of Flight, formerly the Future of Flight Aviation Center and Boeing Tour, where she held multiple roles, including public relations and social media associate director and marketing director. Additionally, Ms. Hawkins raised her family in Silver Firs neighborhood near Mill Creek and spent more than 10 years in marketing, customer service, and sales for Chicago Title and Pacific Northwest Title before graduating from Washington State University. I believe that Jody brings an impressive set of credentials and experience, has a fresh energy and passion, and will bring that to our communications and marketing mission. Her creativity will contribute greatly to our plans to innovate, improve, and expand the core strengths of our communications and marketing platforms, as well as strengthen our community outreach and also our recreation programs. She will be sharing these duties equally with Mr. Scott Harder. I believe that Jody Hawkins is in our Zoom audience this evening. We want to welcome you, Jody, to our team. I also want to acknowledge Mr. Scott Harder is also in attendance this evening. And I'm very confident that even if it's a matter of an update relating to City Hall not opening, when in fact we are open, that it's something that we're going to be able to address quickly. With regard to City Hall opening, we are open. We have signage outside that helps us control the traffic that comes into the building. We meet our residents and stakeholders at the front door to determine who it is they need to meet with, and then escort them to the appropriate parties. What we don't have yet is the wide open door where the lobby can fill up in a manner that is not sensitive to various spectrum of sensitivities here at City Hall. All staff is back at City Hall. And the release that was sent out on July 7th announces that we are working so that there are direct phone numbers for police services, City Hall, general passport services, public work services, development and engineering services. We also actively monitor the front door at City Hall. And all of us have seen folks coming across the parking lot and work to make sure that they're greeted and any other needs are immediately addressed. So we are, I think, ahead of schedule as it relates to our peer communities, but we don't rest on our laurels. We want to make certain that as we continue to welcome our community back and we service our stakeholders here at City Hall, we're also monitoring a lot of factors as it relates to various mutations and variants that are now threatening to increase contagion across the communities that we serve. Our goal, however, is to remain at the open status that we are, and looking forward to one day, they have our doors wide open again without even the monitoring. So the only difference now is instead of working from our counter, we're greeting people at the door and either able to service their needs immediately or working to schedule an appointment to do so. Finally, we have a couple of quick updates from our Public Works Department. Oh, excuse me, I want to back up. We are in truly the final stages of the background check for the Deputy City Manager. I fully expect to be able to make an announcement before our next City Council meeting. And we'll be working to broadcast that information as soon as it becomes available. Now I'll move on to the Public Works Department. Our Public Works Supervisor, Matthew Combs, is going to provide updates. Some of you may have noticed certain paint and striping that has occurred in our streets, but we've got some pictures to show you that it's not acceptable to us how this paint was applied. Matthew Combs has worked with the State Department of Transportation to determine who put the paint down and what we can do to correct it. We want to give you a very quick update on that and another matter. So with Council's permission, I'll turn the floor over to Public Works Supervisor Matthew Combs. Matthew.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm going to share my screen here. As you know, my name is Matthew Combs. You may or may not be aware that WashDOT came out and did some lane restriping a couple of weeks ago. And just for clarity purposes, for everybody's knowledge, WashDOT is in control of and they handle the lane striping on the state highways. Snohomish County, they're responsible for the lane restriping on the county roads, and the city of Mill Creek, we're responsible for the lane striping in the residential streets, which we typically contract out. A couple of weeks ago, WashDOT came out and they were performing lane restriping operations, and there was some issues that arose as a result. As you can see here, pretty subpar work. I was able to get in contact with the project manager for the Department of Washington's Department of Transportation's lane restriping program, and they should be out on Thursday, July 15th, to come back and correct these issues stemming from that project. Pretty short and sweet, but I wanted to make that clear for everybody and apparent that we have contacted WashDOT. Everybody that is called that has issues with paint on their car that stem from that Sunday morning, those are all being redirected to WashDOT as well. So if there are no questions, that is the end of my update.
Thank you.
That concludes our report, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to what we call the second bite at the apple for the audience. I see Mr. Nelson's hand up. I'll give him the first shot and then I'll turn to anyone. Mr. Nelson, name and address in 3 minutes, please.
It'll be less than 3. Will Nelson, 14925 29th Drive Southeast. For those who are interested, I've done a lot of contracting engineering, and it's not uncommon for sometimes some bids way high. And job. We were very busy one year, and I think we had 50% previous estimate, we got the job. Highly profitable. Got a call from the former mayor yesterday and again today. She's had both her shots. Last shot was in March, I think she said. She's got a case of the COVID. She's now subject to an intense study by UW and Fred Hutch. She's at home with this COVID-19 cold type thing. She's not in the hospital. I wish her well. Hope she gets well soon, but she's going to be getting monoclonal antibodies, 11 treatments, I think she said. And I guess the bottom line is be careful out there. She's just been, the only places she's been is Central Market, Lowe's, Albertsons, Home Depot. To her knowledge, not, hugged or kissed anybody lately. No close contacts, but something went ajar. So she's not only a very big statistic in Snohomish County, anyway, if not the United States. So just thought I'd pass that on. Be careful.
Thank you for letting us know. Anyone in the virtual world like to speak to us before we go to executive session? Seeing or hearing none. The council will now recess to executive session. Executive session to discuss one item of pending litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 little I. One item of potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 3 little i's. And performance of a public employee pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1G. No action will be taken when we are done. It looks like we'll need about an hour and 10 minutes to start, so we will be in executive session until 8:30. Thank you.
Good. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting and the executive session till 9:30.
Don't need to make a motion to extend the executive session. Let's just have the motion for the regular meeting, please,
Motion to extend the regular meeting
till 9:30.
till 9:30.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Regular meeting is scheduled, extended till 9:30, and we will extend the executive session till 9:30 as well.
on my 15th hour of the day. Motion to extend till 10 p.m.
Second.
It's a motion to extend the regular meeting till 10 o'clock. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Regular meeting is extended to 10, and we'll also extend the executive session till 10 o'clock as well.
If I would have voted no, you wouldn't have had a caucus. I could have.
Didn't
Think about it. Think about it till too late.
Joe, baby, what should you have? That would give me something about.
All right.
Thank you, Karen.
Got their own police department.
The council has concluded its executive session at 9:59 and without objection. Meeting.
I have a couple of questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, thank you.